I was at an event the other day with my cousin, and there was a lot of old video games and consoles and different things you could look at. And I was looking at GameCube games, and I used to have a GameCube. It was my first. I guess, yeah, it was my first console in a way. I actually had a SNES and a PlayStation beforehand. However, I consider my GameCube as my first console because it was the first console I was intentionally allowed to buy and buy games for. The PlayStation and the SNES were given to me. I only ever had like one or two games for them, and something mysterious happened to both of those consoles, and I don't know what really happened to them. That's a story for a different day. And at this event, I was looking at some of the old GameCube games, and I came across a copy of Chibi Robo, and it was selling for $275. It was crazy. Like, the price was just bonkers. I used to own that game. I used to own Chibi Robo. It's a really fantastic game. And, you know, the hard copy being $275, it was kind of crazy because, one, it actually made me more sad than anything. Partially because I used to own it and I don't anymore, and I like could have had something that was like, you know, worth a little bit of money, but it wasn't that so much that made me sad. It was the fact that like this game, which was once produced and manufactured and made onto a little disc with a little manual inside the box, was now no longer made, and is now a relic of the past, which is such a weird, strange, uncomfortable feeling to feel, because that moment of gaming in like the oddies in the early 10s, the 2010s, I think it's more like the early 2000s, it's kind of it's kind of gone. And I mean, I know we can't go back there. You know, we don't have time travel, unfortunately, yet, if we will ever get it. Excuse me. But I feel so... I don't even know the word. Kind of like this feeling of empty longing for the past, and how enjoyable that time period was of being able to play games like Chibi Robo on the GameCube, or other obscure titles that were made for the enjoyment of many kids and families on these video game consoles, from Mario to Zelda to, you know, whatever game it was. There were so many games that were developed and were never popular. They were never like really big. Chibi Robo was considerably large. There's a lot of people who do know about it, but like there's a lot of other games that were a lot more obscure that people have never heard about. Like, for example, Beautiful Joe. I did play Beautiful Joe. I didn't actually enjoy it that much, but I know some people really liked it. But there was other like titles that were developed that were just, they didn't get that big because there just was a smaller audience for them. But there was still a lot of love and care and passion and dedication put into those projects. And it's sad to see that so many of those video games from the past have been forgotten. And it makes me wonder what the stories of those games were. Like, what was the story of the developers who were making them? Like I don't even know what developers made some of these games. You know, like it's hard to even think of these titles because so many of them are easy to just slip through your mind. One game in particular, I remember from the Nintendo 64, I played this later on as an adult in my 20s, was Jet Force Gemini. And it was actually a really cool N64 game. It was basically an alien invasion was happening on this planet, and you were sent down there to help get rid of the alien invasion and save the local friendly aliens. They were like little koala bears that you had to save. And it wasn't like a very big game. It wasn't a really, well-known game. And there's so many other games like this as well. Rocket Robot on Wheels is another favorite of mine. Very obscure little Nintendo 64 title that few people have ever heard of. But there is a number of people who have heard of it. So there's games like this, and they kind of just, fall away into the realm of the forgotten. And the only people who really remember them are the people who experienced them once. And those are really the only people left to care about those games. And so when I was at this event with my cousin, I was looking at this, Chibi Robo, and I had this feeling come to mind, and it made me kind of sad because he's Gen Z, and I love him to bits. He's an awesome person, and it made me think he's never going to experience these things I experienced, as kind of like I'm like halfway in between millennial and Gen Z. I consider myself as, what do you call them? A zillennial? I can't even remember it. But, he's never going to experience these things that I got to experience. Like the feeling of turning on your PlayStation 1 and hearing that boot up sound. It's like, yeah, you could go to YouTube and listen to the boot up sound now, no problem, and you can kind of get a glimpse of what that nostalgic feel might have felt like. But you were never there in that time period where the internet wasn't that big. Cell phones were not even really a thing. And gaming was this kind of culture that was all word of mouth. Like, you could go buy a video game console at the grocery store or the technology store, and then you could talk to your friends about it. And it was marketed a lot heavily to kids. And then you would kind of talk about it with kids on the playground. Kids that would also either have maybe played the game you played, or they hadn't, and they just wanted to hear about what was the game like to play. And it was so there was just this bond you would have with people, and this experience of enjoying these. And then you have maybe a friend come over to your house, and you would play PlayStation together, or GameCube, or N64, or whatever, and you would share this experience together of this video game. And the world now has changed so much. Excuse me, in that pretty much 20 years that have gone by, the evolution of gaming has rapidly changed into a completely new world. And I find it a little bit difficult to really know and understand where gaming is going to go next. And there is this kind of sad element about this loss of this time period, because while I am deeply grateful I got to experience this, I'm actually quite sad that Gen Z and Gen Alpha will never get to experience the same joy and love of gaming in that time frame. They won't really know how much we would have loved to have carried the torch, or have someone else carry the torch forward in terms of that culture. Because gaming now, you look at Roblox, for example, and it has like millions of users. And there's nothing wrong with Roblox in itself. I think it's actually a really cool game. I used to play it a lot when I was a kid, and I enjoyed that experience at the time. It's changed drastically since I played it. But, now there's more microtransactions in gaming. There's gaming subscription services. Like, for example, Trackmania, you had to pay a subscription. You don't have to, but I think they pretty much almost force you to pay a subscription if you actually want access to the full game. Like, it's kind of sad. And I mean, I know that developers also need to make money, especially if they're going to do a continued live service game. So in a sense, it's somewhat justifiable. But, you used to be able to go to the store, buy a video game for like, $60, $50, and you take it home and it was yours. Like you owned the physical copy, you owned the console, you could play it on. The only reason you'd ever need to pay money for it again is if it broke, and that was usually your own responsibility, right? Like if you broke the disc or something like that, or got too scratched. So you tried to take care of them. But now, like, we don't even own anything anymore. Like, it's kind of sad. Like, you don't even own, like, like you can't really own Roblox. Like, you can't, I don't know if you can play Roblox offline, but you know, you don't really own these things anymore, these games. You used to, like, everything has become downloadable content. Like on the PlayStation Store or the Xbox Store, like there, I remember watching the shift of buying physical copies of games, and I had a large collection at the time, probably like 100 physical copies of games. And I was very fortunate because I got to like spend most of the money I earned on video gaming, and it was fun. You know, this is more of a first world problem as well. I should articulate, like, not everyone had access to video games. I'm very fortunate and grateful, and that I even got to play them. But I had a significant library at the time, and I remember watching Xbox start, you know, including games on their, like, you could download. I remember that you could buy and download Braid or Super Meat Boy or Greed Corp, or there were so many titles. Or Splosion Man, which I didn't play, but yeah, there was just so many titles to download and play, and then I started thinking, well, if it's so cheap to download a game, or it's so much easier, like, this is obviously the trend because there's less friction here. I don't have to go to the video game store. I don't have to go over to GameStop, buy a physical copy, come back to my house, put the disc into the machine, and then start the machine up. I can just start the machine up, use my credit card, buy a game, download it in 5 minutes, and start playing, which is removing so much friction. So it was pretty clear to see the trend that gaming was taking. It was like you are now going to start downloading software. And I think in a way, this also devalued software in general. Like, if I look at Steam, even today, like I look at Steam and all the games that are listed on the Steam store, there's so many games that are like $80, $120, like brand new AAA titles that are coming out for really exorbitant amounts of money if you want the full access to the full game. And I'm like, I can't justify spending that much money on a video game anymore, because like there's just this massive, incredibly huge library of video games. It's ridiculous. And so now, if I'm going to buy a new game, I kind of have to like be judicial about it. I'm like, one, am I going to even play this game? And two, how much is it going to cost me? And oftentimes, I really don't want to buy a game that costs more than $10. Like, I'm also very interested and heavily invested in the indie scene, but I can't see myself buying a game for $20 or $30 unless I know I'm going to be spending a lot of time playing it. And usually, if I am spending that much money on a game, I'm doing it to spend time with a friend, like a co-op experience. Like Deep Rock Galactic, for example. That's a game I could justify spending $30 on, especially if, and most importantly, actually, if I'm going to be hanging out with a friend online, playing that game with them because they also want to play it with me. Now, as I get older, and I just can't see myself spending an upwards of more than $30 on a video game anymore. It's become too expensive. And it's different for your different people at different stages of their life, right? Like if you have tons of time in your teens and in your 20s to spend on video game, you're going to be able to spend a bit more money on it and enjoy that process. But, you know, there's even now for kids like, or Gen Z, Gen Alpha, their time is so much more dominated now by content. Like they're getting TikTok content constantly, and the content is free because, you know, they just have to download the app and suddenly they're getting hit with waves of dopamine. And this itself is diluting the value of a video game, because a video game is also trying to capture your attention. So the more content that exists, whether that's a video or a video game, the more saturated the sphere becomes and the less valuable a single piece of content is. And you can also look at artificial intelligence, as that is also accelerating the devaluation of content in general. And content really can be anything from a book to a movie to a video game to a YouTube video. And it depends, how you want to define content. But it's all in this kind of sphere of media. And it's kind of wild to see how much this has evolved, how much this has changed, how much this small little period of time where there was just this really good, beautiful moment and series of moments you could have with people is now gone. And it's a memory. And it's sad because we don't really have a weight of carrying the torch, because things are still evolving and changing so much faster than they ever used to. And I'm not against change. Change is bound to happen. The only constant in life is change. It still doesn't mean that I'm not sad about it, though. And I hope that we don't see the end of like this whole era of gaming in general, where we have Nintendo consoles and PlayStation and Xbox, but it is getting more harder to enter that market. A PlayStation console is like $600, maybe it's more. Nintendo Switch 2, also expensive. Same with an Xbox. It's not cheap. And also, it feels like even in these spaces, like you'd be better off almost owning a PC and PC gaming now anyway, which is also expensive. A PC can cost a lot of money, especially now with GPU and RAM prices like skyrocketing into, wherever they're going. And now I think that's also hard drive space as well. So gaming is becoming more expensive of a hobby. And the games that are staying more permanent into society and cultures at large are the gaming experiences that are more free and accessible, like Roblox, like Fortnite, or Rocket League, whatever it is. The ones that you can just download. Maybe they require low system requirements, and then what they have behind them is microtransactions and subscription services. And maybe that's just what gaming will become, and maybe that's just a big trend at large, or maybe we will return back to this whole era of consoles, but it doesn't seem like it's that way anymore, and it feels like that's kind of like a now relic of the past. And it's strange because life moves by so fast, and then you're looking backwards and you're like, where did that time go? And yeah, I guess this is a bit more of a sad video. It's kind of nostalgic, but to think back on how much you could have been, you did enjoy those experiences. And I think the saddest feeling for me is just wishing that the next generation would also be able to experience those things again, but that might not happen. And if you are younger and you haven't experienced a lot of console gaming or, games from the past, I would encourage you to check some of them out, because there's some pretty awesome games out there. Starting with Zelda, you can find a lot more that were just really enjoyable experiences. Like there's just so many old pieces of media that are long forgotten in terms of just not being passed on to the next generation, which is, yeah, it's a little bit sad. But, I still think there's, a lot of people out there who are still trying to, communicate to others about, hey, you should try this game. It's old, but it's still great. It's got clunky controls, but there's just something fun about it because you go on an adventure. But it's also hard to communicate that when there's so much novelty in other areas with the internet now, with TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and X, whatever it is. To keep someone's attention focused on something of the past is pretty hard, and I'm not sure what's going to happen to that sphere of gaming. Maybe it will just live on as a memory for us millennials and some of the Gen X who played the old 80s games. I didn't play as many of those, and they played more of them than I did, but I'm sure they have memories like I do, wishing other people had played some of those games as well. Yeah, if this video has a point, it's to maybe crack open one of your old video games, play it again, relive that little experience of nostalgia for a little while. And yeah, be grateful for how good we had it when it was there, because it was pretty awesome. And I'm sure there's still more awesome things to come in the future and from here on out. So even though there's microtransactions and subscription services, I'm still sure there's a lot of great experiences to be had.